Hello my friends, welcome to The Big Picture. It's wonderful to have you joining us again at the Living Ministry Media Studios for week 2 of our Sabbath School Bible Study Ministry Development Series. Each week we aim to be taking you on a journey deep into the core issues of the week's Bible study. We want to enable you to be able to present the key issues of the week's study in an uncomplicated way. We want to provide you with a short resource that will enable your presentation of the weekly Bible study to be both relevant to the times and biblically authentic. Each week, we'll have discussion starters that you can use in the Bible study group at your church. Hello, I'm Pastor Gary, mentor and chaplain to the Living Ministry Media team. This week we move right into Daniel chapter 1. The study is entitled From Jerusalem to Babylon. Let's have a look at this week's study. In Daniel chapter 1 of the story, Daniel's life and ministry really begins. He's a young man in training. What a story this is. The year is 605 BC. Daniel's life has been totally upended. His comfortable life is in disarray. He's gone from prince to prisoner of war, from a respected somebody to an unknowable nobody. He's only a young man, but the best life he can look forward to is one of servitude in the city of Babylon. But how quickly the scene changes. Daniel is presented with some unexpected opportunities. At the bequest of the king, he's offered education. Imagine it, fee-free at the University of Babylon. Later in the chapter, we find him receiving food and wine from the king's table, no longer to be bound to the servants' quarters. This is the opportunity to have the title KC, King's Counselor, appended to his name. You know the story. You know it so well. In the big city of Babylon, Daniel has found opportunity. He's found training, possibilities, social rewards, entertainment, connections to the right people. Life in the big city can be good, but it's in this big city environment that he's called to live out his faith. Like Joseph and Moses before him, living his faith is not going to come without cost. So what are the core issues of this chapter? I want to suggest there are 2 major issues. The first issue of Daniel 1 is the story of faith under pressure. This is a chapter that asks, how is the believer to do faith in the secular environment of the big city? It deals with a believer living in a non-believing environment who has to make a decision concerning the faith of his youth. But there's something even more insidious going on. It's picked up by the study guide on Monday of this week. Notice the commentary. Notice what it says. Ancient kings would often recruit some of their best captives to serve in the royal palace, and thereby those individuals would switch their loyalty to the king and to the gods of the empire that captured them. Indeed, the whole educational process was intended to effect a conversion, an indoctrination, if you will, that would result in a change of worldview. This is really important. Please don't miss it. What is really occurring in Babylon? Daniel is facing the process of what we would call re-education. The Babylonian educational process is designed to create captives that spoke like Babylonians, dressed like Babylonians, sung like Babylonians, enjoyed the entertainment of Babylon, until finally the captives would even smell and think like Babylonians. Let me ask you, have you ever seen this process happen in the big cities of our world? If you're leading a group Bible discussion this Sabbath, why not ask this question? You could ask, in what ways do you find the secular environment of the third millennium quietly re-educating the thinking processes of even committed Christians. Thankfully, I believe it's possible to maintain faith in even the most secular environments. But here's the rider, and I might get into trouble with some of you for saying this, but I believe it takes a conscious desire and, as Daniel shows us, a willing, consistent effort to maintain such a faith. Let me say it again. Maintaining Christian faith appears to require an effort. Perhaps you could ask your Bible study group whether they agree with this. I would be really interested to hear their response. The second core issue in this chapter is the example of how Daniel practiced his faith in the marketplace of ancient Babylon. Consider how Daniel responded following his appointment to the re-education program. But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with a portion of the king's delicacies or with the wine with which he drank. But he didn't just stop with a quiet personal commitment. Rather, he tactfully approached the king's steward with a request. This is what he said: "Please test your servants for 10 days. Give us vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then let our appearance be examined before you." Now, in making this request, Daniel is hardly speaking from a position of strength. Nevertheless, he senses a problem with both the food and the drink that came from the king's table. He understood that there were things in Babylon that could defile him. He understood there was a conflict between faith and Babylonian cultural expectations. Now I ask, is this a challenge for us today? I believe that this is an increasing challenge. I'm only too well aware that increasingly Adventist families are facing major difficulties. Just as in Daniel's day, food and alcohol issues, they remain today. But this is not all contemporary Christians are being regularly served. No, the picture is much bigger. Increasingly, I find it is frustrated parents who share almost in tears at the impact of media, consumer culture, music, video gaming technology, and the impact it's having on their children. When I speak to parents, they're very aware that the faith of their children is being almost entirely negated by these cultural issues. Unfortunately, the prevailing argument seems to be, I'm saved by grace, so what I place in my body is of little consequence. Do you believe this argument has substance? Why not discuss this in your discussion group? But please don't forget to study carefully the example of Daniel. How wonderfully bold was Team Daniel. There's no arrogance in Daniel's request, just an authentic desire to do the will of God. This response of God's servant comes from his relationship to the sovereign God. Somewhere he had learned that there were things in the big city that could defile him. Somewhere he had discovered that the only appropriate response was to be a genuine radical, to plan wisely in order that faith might be more than an unsaving form of pseudo-intellectual assent. It was this decision that launched Daniel on a life of powerful ministry. It enabled him to rise to some of the most powerful positions the world has ever seen. What a man was Daniel. Well, that's it for this week. Thank you for joining with us. May the Lord richly bless you as you teach from the book of Daniel this Sabbath. You're dealing with scriptural treasure. This is an absolute goldmine. I'm Pastor Gary. Really look forward to meeting with you next week.